Good evening. First, I would like to have a motion that we reopen this meeting. Commissioner Richardson, second by Commissioner McFadden. All those in favor?
Richardson.
Chinya? Okay. Whatever that number is, we all said yes. Okay. And I'm going to ask that we call this meeting to order with the presentation of colors by the JROTC at Mergenthaler Vocational Technical High School. Ask if you are able, please stand. We want to thank again all of our students for this evening. First of all, the JROTC for Mergenthaler Vocational Technical High School, MERVO. I'm going to say, as I start, I want to apologize if I do not say all of these names correctly. But we had Cadet Commander Cannon, Cadet Lieutenant Aluwafimi, Cadet Lieutenant Jefferson, Cadet Lieutenant Commander Ware, Cadet Master Chief Petty Officer Cabell. And then we also want to thank the student performers from Connections Middle High School with Mr. Brandon Booth as the director, Makira Dingle, Nia White, Kalia Bowling, Janelle Jordan, Jemiah Goodwin, Kanye Saxon, Dietrich Jordan, Zanea White, Heaven Osborne, Destiny Ford, Cameron Skinner, Cameron Phillips, Takira Dingle, Ricky Howard, Jakira Brooks, and Janora Grissom. Help us once again to thank all of those students. Let me also apologize for my voice. What I have is not catching, but it's hit my throat, so sorry about that. Could I have a motion for the approval of the prior open session meetings?
So moved.
Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Bondima. All those in favor?
Richardson.
Chinya? Is that 9? And 1 absent. Wow, okay. And now I have a motion for the approval of the closed session summaries. Commissioner Bondima, seconded by Commissioner Richardson. All those in favor?
Richardson.
Chinya? Okay, and that's 8, 1 absent, and, right. For board chair comments this evening, this is going to be very brief. We're very happy to see you, and given the state of my voice, I'm not going to have additional remarks. I think we have a pretty full board session, so thank you all for being here. Just a reminder that I know that this month is, we will have National Education Week during this month, so just a reminder to folks, if you have not, it's next week, to please plan to visit your neighborhood school. How's that? At this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to accept the hearing officer's recommendation for appeals and hearings case number 19-64A. Before I do that, I'm sorry, I need to remind folks that this evening we do have a Spanish language interpreter, and it's Miss Miriam Carrion. Are you? Okay, thank you. If there's anyone who needs her assistance, if you would just let her know, and she will be happy to help you. Thanks a lot. Okay. Okay. So this one, appeals and hearings, we have pulled for a separate vote. So I need a motion to accept the hearing officer's recommendation for appeals and hearing case number 19-64. Commissioner Richardson, second. Commissioner Reed, all those in favor? Bondima?
Richardson.
Chinya? Okay, all those opposed? Okay, so that is 7 and 1. 7 for, 1 nay, 1 absent. Okay. And now a motion to approve the remaining personnel and quasi-judicial matters.
So moved.
Commissioner Richardson, is there a second? Commissioner Berkeley, all those in favor? Bondima,
Richardson.
Chinya, McFadden, Brooks, Reed, and Berkeley. Okay, and now I have 8, 1 absent. Okay. Dr. Santelises.
Good evening, everyone. It is good to see folks here. One of the things that is definitely the case is that a critical element to our blueprint and our work is a continued focus on the development of the whole child. Over the course of the year, Callaway Elementary, the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and a local artist worked together to create an 1,800 square foot mural. The mural incorporates lessons about the brain, reading for 15 minutes a day, become an artist, and feeling a sense of pride through collaboration. I had a great time at the ribbon cutting ceremony and was honored to be there. What I want to share tonight is a look at some of the video coverage of the ribbon cutting ceremony, and it is courtesy of student reporter Niles Garrison and the City Schools media team.
Hey everyone, this is Niles Garrison, and right now we are heading out to see an 1,800 square foot mural that is simply breathtaking. For almost a year, students and staff from Callaway Elementary School work with community partners to combine the world of science and art. The results are magical.
And this thing's cool, if you couldn't tell.
Yeah, I'm behind myself. And not only is it just a piece of art, to me, it's like an accomplishment. Like magic and love and art in one.
If tensions are high, stress at work, stress at school or home, there's no better benefit for your brain than getting lost in a book.
With support from the University of Maryland Medical School, Reading on the Brain is a program that combines learning about the brain and how reading benefits the brain.
The neuron, that exquisite, marvelous link from the brain to our body, and they swirl above each reader, signifying the power that each of us can harness with a simple but amazing and important act of reading.
They were just learning and engaging and building their knowledge of the brain and the things that benefit the brain and their emotions and expressing all of that through this artwork.
Anytime we have cross-curricular connections, it strengthens the students' knowledge on what they're learning and allows them to be better prepared for school and for learning later on.
And art can inspire and make a difference.
Fun, engaging, and inspiring are just a few words to describe the experience for the students who share with us an overwhelming sense of pride and accomplishment.
The people who worked on it, like me, Jeremiah, Jaden, they'll leave a mark that we worked on this. It feels amazing just to be on here. Like one day I just might be an old man coming up here and say that was me, and people just might believe me.
The students are using this project as a way to see into their futures.
I think this was like a fun way to help kids focus more so we can have good academics so they can go whatever middle school they want to.
Just 15 minutes? What about fourth grade? You gotta read 20 minutes.
And then I could like do stuff on the brain, and I want to be like a veterinarian and a president because I want more rights for different things, like in the form of stuff through art.
Taking the lead in their learning, and we're providing the venue and facilitating that learning and inspiring them to be the change we want to see in the world.
Part of our Whole Child initiative is really represented in this work, that you are not just a scientist, but you can also be an artist, and you are also a writer and an author, and you are an appreciator of literature. That is what wholeness means.
Way to go, Callaway. We are so proud of you. This has been Niles Garrison from the City Schools Student Media Team. See you next time. Hey.
Great. Thank you, Niles and the student media team. And a real special thanks to artist Jay Schlossberg Cohen and the University of Maryland School of Medicine. And congratulations to Principal Miguel Del Toro and his staff at Callaway. And most of all, of course, to the young people of Callaway. I cannot overstate the importance of student voice and the critical role that it plays in the successful implementation of the blueprint and, frankly, learning for both adults and young people. The Youth Leadership Advisory Council is a valuable partner in that process, and it is my pleasure to introduce our current Youth Leadership Advisory Council members this evening. I would ask each student to stand and be recognized when I call your name, so y'all can sit a little bit longer. Okay, you got it? Great. First, our youth ambassadors and council leads. Jasmine Moore from City College. And Haiti Herbert from Poly. I will tell you that both young ladies did a fabulous job at the last meeting. It was lovely to know other people had the facilitation completely in hand, so thank you, ladies. From BARD, I would like to recognize Shaker Fulton and Cherish Payne. Cherish is an alumnus of Bard who currently attends CCBC. Can you both stand? Oh, they're not here, okay. From Dunbar, Kyrie Sykes and Ayeni Brown. Well, taking care of business. That's all right, that's all right. Also from Poly, we have Maritza Artiga. Good. Christina Dingzon. Pearl Dingzon. Sydney Johnson. Hunter Saylor. And Gabrielle Thomas. From Mergenthaler, we have William Owens. From Baltimore School for the Arts, we have Jay Simonette, Tatum Geisen, and Malik Savage. All right. From Reach Partnership, we have Brianna Watson. And from P-Tech at Carver, Christopher Blount. And our middle school representative, Sean Treese Washington from Mount Royal Elementary Middle School. Well, I want to thank all of you for giving all of us, and myself in particular, the unique perspective that only you all can provide. Already you've been yes, go ahead. We have Sophia. Great, well then could you introduce her, because Sophia, you are not on my list, let me know. So Sophia, what school is Sophia from? City Neighbors. Thank you for joining us, Sophia, and my apology that you weren't on my list, but it's more important that you're here than that you're on my list. So I'm thankful for you coming. Thank you. I would also like to mention that the application process for the Youth Leadership Advisory Council is still open. Our goal is to fill 13 more slots with additional schools in order to achieve diverse representation of our district's high schools and neighborhoods. And I want to thank Mr. Staten just for his work in facilitating this, giving the young people the space. And I want you to know he was nowhere to be found because he had an additional commitment, a previous commitment, and like a good support person is, it ran smoothly without him even being there, but I know that's because of the support he gave prior, so thank you for all your work too. As I hope everyone knows, in this year's legislative session, the Maryland General Assembly will be debating a new funding formula for Maryland schools, often referred to as the Kirwan Commission. As that important debate gets underway, I would like to take a moment to share City Schools' progress in implementing the initial funding that City Schools received from this school year through the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And yes, we had Blueprint for Success here in Baltimore City long before the Kirwan Commission called theirs a Blueprint. Thank you, Commissioner McFadden, for pointing that out. These funds represent an important first step toward fulfilling the Kirwan Commission's recommendations. And I am proud to report that City Schools has been able to quickly utilize these resources to provide increased support to schools and students. As I introduce Cleo Hirsch and Kim Hoffman, who will review our progress on these supports, I just want to thank Chief Perkins Cohen and both Cleo and Kim, who are coming now, and just all of the leaders who worked really hard to make sure that this initial deposit on the concentration of poverty dollars that many of you have heard about was done in such a way that was flexible for schools, allowed for targeted supports, but much needed supports. As I go through the district, I have yet to meet a principal or school leader that has not been able to use or to describe the use of those dollars in ways that have had immediate impact for young people. So I will now turn it over to both Ms. Hirsch and Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises. Good evening, Board, Commissioners. This evening, so we are bringing you an update on the 5 grant programs that have come to us through Senate Bill 1030, All 5 of these programs are to support us within this current school year, 1920, and next school year, 2021. Through these grants, you can see on the screen, we are getting roughly $50 million. We're going to briefly go through each of these for you and let you know how they are supporting in the district. We are also bringing you this update in advance of an update we have due to the General Assembly on December 1st. So the first program, the Teacher Incentive Grant, is supporting the cost of the 2% salary increase that our teachers received as part of their contract negotiations for FY21. The majority of the increase, the $8.6 million, $8.4 is coming from this grant, and $200,000 came from City Schools' contribution. The second grant program is called the Transitional Supplemental Support. We traditionally call this the Struggling Learners Grant. This is $4.1 million to basically provide tutoring, intervention to students in grades K through 3. It has very specific requirements what it can be used for, only the highest levels of the federal evidence-based standards. We are doing this work in 9 public schools, and we also made this grant available to charter schools. Charter schools could apply for grants of up to $40,000. 17 individual charter schools were awarded a grant, and they're all working to implement those right now. We also have a grant for a mental health coordinator, and we are in the process of hiring and filling that position to meet a requirement of state law. And the one program that we do not have a slide for, but just to mention, there is a special education grant of $9.7 million that is supporting the provision of services to our students with disabilities through IEPs and 504 plans.
Great. So I'm going to dive into the Concentrations of Poverty grant. This was the biggest pot of money we received under SB 1030. As stipulated under the law, if you had 40 or more schools that were eligible for these funds, you could create a centralized plan for how you would support the schools and provide wraparound services. And so we did just that. We created a plan with 4 central tenets to expand nursing services, to increase the number of community schools, to provide centrally funded wraparound supports to schools, and then to provide each school with funds so that they could select choice wraparound services based on the unique needs of their students. Charter schools received the allocation, which is about $240,000 per school, essentially directly in order to provide them with the utmost autonomy to enact wraparound services that they felt they needed pursuant to their charters. So the first part of our plan was a nursing expansion. So we already had an extensive partnership with the Baltimore City Health Department to provide nursing services to schools. Under the current composition of nursing services, some schools have full-time registered nurses, while other schools have certified nurse assistants, CNAs, that are supervised by part-time nurses. So we provided additional funds to the health department in order to increase nursing services so that every school has a full-time RN. I will just say before I talk about how we're doing that there is a national nursing shortage. And so the Baltimore City Health Department is working hard to find nurses wherever possible. And we did increase the funding support so that as they find nurses, they can hire them for these schools. But we likely won't be able to hire enough nurses to give each school a full-time RN. So this is a little complicated. I won't get too far into the weeds, but if you see under the left-hand column that says current state, basically how our nursing supports work right now in schools is that some schools, like School C, has a full-time RN, while other schools, like School A and B, have a full-time certified nurse assistant that's overseen by a part-time RN. So you can see the little RN person to the left. She might spend 2 days at School A and 3 days at School B, and that enables the certified nurse assistants to have the the right nurse licensure to do what they need every day. So we can't just move that RN into School A, for example, because then who would be supervising the CNA in School B? So this graphic shows the very complicated process the health department is going through to try to find a new RN for School A, thus moving the existing RN into School B, and then School C would stay in their current state. So it's a little complicated. I'm happy to answer questions if you have it. I will note where it says the CNAs would move, that doesn't necessarily mean the CNAs wouldn't be a part of our system. We're still working out a long-term staffing model. It just means that under the legislation, every school legally is supposed to have a full-time RN, and so we're meeting to meet the legislative requirements. Next was the community schools expansion. Again, under the law, we were required to hire a community school coordinator for every school eligible for these funds. So for new community schools, that meant that the grant covered the cost of hiring that community school coordinator. For existing community schools that were a part of the mayor's community school strategy, we were able to use the funds to pay for the school match. And then we also reserved $5,000 per school for a community school implementation fund. That will give the schools a little bit of seed money to do community school activities once they hire their coordinator. So this is just a model to show where we've gone in a very rapid amount of time. I want to thank Chief Hike Hubbard and Holly Gonzalez and Sheila Drummond-Can. Holly and Sheila are our community school manager and specialist, and they've done an amazing job growing this program from 50 community schools last year to 126 community schools this year. So I just kudos to them. Yeah. So there's 3 paths to become a community school under this grant. Like I said, there was already 50 community schools. For the community schools that are new, they could either select to partner with a lead agency. So that's through the Family League's community schools work. They could partner with an existing lead agency to become a community school. We also gave new community organizations the chance to become lead agencies, so we opened up a RFP process. That's still ongoing. As you know, that takes a while to go through that process. But 5 schools wanted to, maybe they had an existing relationship with a small community organization near them, and they wanted that group to be their lead agency, so we created a process for that to happen. And then we also created a position centrally, which is called the Community School Site Specialist. It's the same thing as a community school coordinator, and that's a district-hired community school coordinator. So as you can see, 42 schools selected city schools to become their lead agency and to hire a coordinator through us. Okay, so the third tenet of our plan was to create centrally funded wraparound supports. So on the right here, you see the wraparound supports that we provided centrally to schools. So this included expanding social workers to ensure that every school has a 1.0 social worker. We only paid for the expansion under this grant. So if they had a half-time social worker, we were able to up it to a full-time social worker, and we paid for the 0.5 of that person's salary. Judy centers were paid for as a wraparound service under this plan. The expansion of advanced placement courses. A very popular one was that we are able to purchase some buses that will be available to schools at a highly subsidized rate to take students to enrichment and field trip opportunities. We created a new teacher support suite, and we gave concentrations of poverty-eligible school access to BCTR, TFA, and New Teacher Institute using these funds. And then we also created some central positions that we call wholeness supports to focus on school safety conferencing, attendance, and enrichment. So I'm going to pass it over to Kim. Kim's office, we also created 2 positions under Kim's office to administer this grant. It's a big grant. And like I said, we created some choice funds for each school. And so Kim's going to talk a little bit about the types of choices schools had made and how her team has been supporting them to create their school budgets.
So we were able to get all of this out to schools before the school year opened. We were very busy over the summertime, but every school had a menu to choose from. And like Cleo said in the beginning, the process was very similar for charter schools. Charter schools just had their full allocation so that they could make their own choices, but the process worked the same way. For their choice funds, they worked with their school community, they worked with their ILED to pretty much select things under school counseling, if they wanted even more related services, if they wanted to bring in sports, if they wanted to bring in arts programming. Any of those things that fell within the 13 areas in the legislation as wraparound services. Every school wrote their own plan. ILEDs approved it, and schools had money in hand for the opening of the school year. That was something we worked very, very hard to do. I almost turned my mic off. And we did reach out to a couple of our schools to give you some scenarios of how these things were actually leveraged. So George Washington Elementary School, the principal is really committed to reading and reading support. She asked if she could use some of these funds so that she could maintain a reading intervention teacher. So she leveraged her grant funds to buy a half of a reading intervention teacher and coaching and support for the rest of her teachers in her school around literacy. And you can see from her quote here, she's very pleased with what this was able to do, and something she wouldn't have been able to continue in her building if this grant wasn't made available. Another example, because all of our schools that got this grant aren't necessarily our traditional schools. Alternative option schools were eligible for this grant, as well as special ed centers. The William S. Baer School is one of our, it was a K-12, pre-K-12, special ed center for students with significant disabilities. They elected to use their funds to purchase a full-time music therapy teacher. This quote just gives a very small piece of what this is actually doing for their students. In talking with the principal and talking with the music therapy teacher, they have students that prior to this experience were not communicating in any way. And now with music, with movement, they are seeing responses from students that they had not seen before. And they would not have been able to offer this service to their students without the funds from this grant.
So we have an appendix that goes through, the board has the appendix that goes through some more details about how schools chose to spend their money, but we're happy to answer any questions you may have, and including details on how schools spent their money or anything else we covered in the plan.
I don't have a question. I just want to congratulate you and the team. I know that this money was made available not even a year ago. As you presented, it seems like you've been thinking about it for years. So its implementation
It feels like that.
It might feel that way, but it's incredibly thoughtful. It will be even more impactful. And the presentation is terrific. Actually, we don't have it, so I hope it is able to be posted
Oh, sure.
to the public, because
Yes.
it's exactly what the public should see about what's happening with the small down payment that we receive from the state and how the city is putting it to good use.
Great, I want to thank you again, ladies, just not only for the presentation, but as representatives of the full team, your lift on this, given the short amount of time that you had, really was exemplary. So, thank you. So I will also continue with referencing this year's results that MSDE recently released of the 2019 National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP. This assessment, just by way of reminder, is administered in reading and math every other year to students in grades 4 and 8 and allows comparisons in achievement across states and across a subset of 27 large urban school districts called the Trial Urban District Assessment, or TUDA. We are proud to be part of the TUDA Consortium among 27 peer districts demographically and performance-wise. We're in line generally with Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia. The reason why the TUDA was established was a way of enabling my colleagues and I to be able to, within our districts, actually be able to see growth in comparison settings and, frankly, to learn from one another. One of the larger gainers on the NAEP consistently is Washington, D.C., and as fate would have it, the cabinet and I, not knowing the official time when NAEP would be released, we actually had planned a cabinet visit to DC to learn from them and some of the procedures and processes that they have in place. I only draw attention to that to say that learning from colleagues is not something just that teachers need to do or that school leaders need to do, but frankly, we as a district need to do. City schools results generally overall held steady from 2017 in both subjects and grades. The changes in Baltimore City's scores were consistent with, or in a few cases better than, the state of Maryland nationally. Now, having said that, and recognizing the hard work of schools and some of our recent gains within our state framework, I just want to also emphasize that this is not kind of the end goal. We know that we are expecting more. I believe our school folks would say that too. And we are in particular committing ourselves to narrowing the difference between the performance of Black students, Latino students, and white city school students, which in fact has widened since 2009. So this is a matter of both equity and urgency for us. We believe that a number of the processes and changes that we've put in place are actually some of the work that we are doing, in addition to the board's establishment of our equity policy and the establishment of an equity team within the district that I can tell you has already begun work with schools and school leaders and teachers. Some of the early reports back on that work have been really an increased demand for more. We also are in the second year of implementing our new curricula in English language arts and math. We have literacy coaches in 40 schools, advanced placement classes in every high school, and updated ongoing professional learning for staff, in addition to the work that we are doing in focus around the social emotional learning and, frankly, healthy school environments. It is progress, but we know that we need to accelerate and expand our efforts in support of our students. We know that they have limitless potential, and as we go about the work of, frankly, dismantling what has been a time trajectory of kind of, not doing that, we remain committed to the measures that the board has supported and some of the new measures even that are being put in place this year as well. So our goal is to make sure that our young people are equipped with everything that they need, and NAEP is just one indicator of that progress, but an important one. It is now my pleasure to congratulate a member of the city schools team who really exemplifies educational excellence. As part of our district focus on equity and opportunity for all students, we have expanded access to advanced academics, gifted and advanced learning, and honors programming in the middle school, in more schools in every section of the city, not just a select few. I didn't bring the map that I frequently show to staff and in community meetings of the expansion of this programming over the last 3 years. We're very proud to say that in every zip code within Baltimore City, we have identified far more learners who are ready for advanced learning opportunities, as well as far more nurturing of young people who, with the right support, would qualify. And I have to say, very forthrightly, this is a staff member whom I will just say very honestly, I probably would not have been as enthusiastic about the expansion of gifted and advanced learning had it not been that it is Dennis Jutras who's leading that effort. As many of you know, gifted and advanced learning has often been used as a tool to further segregate, as a tool to further deny opportunity, particularly to young students of color and students from low-income backgrounds. And so I remember sitting down with Dennis when I first came in and saying, if we are going to put energy in this, you have to be willing to make sure that we are going to every corner of this city. And I will tell you, we are being recognized nationwide for the expansion of opportunity that we are providing through this. And it is no question in my mind that that is really due to the leadership of Dennis Jutras. Now, that's progress. We know we need to accelerate and expand our efforts, but I will tell you there are not many districts who would have been a year early, and he would never admit this when I told him we need advanced placement in every single high school. We had originally set for that to be the case probably a year from now. Is that correct, Dennis? And we got there a year early because of his leadership. And so when people tell me it's nice to see the district moving, XYZ, I am very clear that I know it is not me, it is the team that we have, and Dennis Jutras exemplifies the leadership focus of the blueprint of leading from his seat. There is not a neighborhood in this city that he has not gone into when parents have requested, when families have wanted to know more. And so we are thrilled because in recognition, even though we always knew, I always knew that he led from this, we were so pleased when the National Association for Gifted Children recently honored Dennis, our city schools coordinator of Gifted and Advanced Learning, with their National Gifted Coordinator of the Year Award. I would now like to invite Dennis to come forward and be recognized for this great achievement.
Take it in portrait.
That's nice. All righty. Finally, and it's not to end on a low note, but it is to end on a sober note, at least my official comments for the evening. I just want to say that the epidemic level of violence that we are experiencing, and that I believe is something that every citizen of this city is concerned about, is in fact impacting our schools. As many of you know, yesterday 2 of our students were violently assaulted in separate incidents, a shooting and a stabbing. Our thoughts and prayers are with students, both of whom are currently in the hospital as well as their families. The incidents took place outside of the official school building, but the impact is no less. Last school year, we lost 12 city school students to gun violence. Now, even at that time, those 12 students were greater than the number of young people that I had lost as even an educator over probably a 5 or 6 year span. Since June, in less than 6 months, 10 more of our students have been murdered. In the past 2.5 years, 31 city school students have died from violence on the streets of Baltimore, a number that is literally would have been considered incomprehensible even 5 or 7 years ago. Many more have been injured, like our 2 students yesterday, and all of us at some level have been traumatized. We have taken significant steps to secure our buildings, to ensure the safety of our students and staff, and we will continue to expand those efforts. In addition, we have made historic investments in social emotional learning for students and adults, establishing 56 schools as wholeness sites, 41 of which have staffed wholeness rooms where students can learn to deal with the effects of trauma in their lives. And I have to say that what we have found over just the last 1.5 years is that our staff in many cases are dealing with as much challenge as any of the young people that they are called to serve. We will continue to provide training to school and district staff on techniques for not only helping students overcome these effects, but frankly, to make schools the healthy environments, communities, and ecosystems that we need them to be. Our goal is to make our schools sanctuaries where students and staff feel safe and supported, and admittedly, we have a ways to go, but we also are on the path. Unfortunately, even with that, we cannot entirely protect them from the violence that surrounds them and the resulting trauma that permeates so many of their young lives. Tragically, we don't have all of the answers. I have never purported to have all the answers. But this I do promise you, that we have the commitment, the determination to continue our fight on behalf of our children. We will not stop. I will not surrender to despair, because the future and promise of our children is at stake, and that is a responsibility that we as adults cannot and will not shirk. This concludes my remarks for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises. I just want to take a moment for those last comments to just really sink into all of us. We're going to move to information and discussion, and our item is on waiver request from the Charter Lottery. We're ready? Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives.
I'm Kim Coleman. I'm a specialist in the Office of New Initiatives.
The requests that are before you are pursuant to applications that the board approved last June. They're at this timing so that we can be in order for upcoming charter lotteries, which occur in February, so you'll vote in December. So we're sharing the requests so that if you approve these, then schools can use these considerations in their upcoming lotteries.
Charters can request waivers of state and local policies and regulations and collective bargaining agreements, and the ones that we're bringing forward today for consideration by the school board include first, geographic attendance areas, which is new to Maryland Charter Law in 2015. As of 2015, schools can request waivers that allow them the ability to give lottery preference to students that live within a specific geographic zone, given specific conditions are met. The median income of the geographic attendance area must be equal to or less than the median income of the city. And schools can only request up to 35% of the available seats to the geographic attendance area. The decision cannot be appealed to the state also. This year we received 2 waiver requests, one from New Song Academy and one from Clay Hill Public Charter School. In reviewing the request, staff examined evidence of demand or capacity to meet the change, evidence that they engaged stakeholders in the process, the quality of programming offered by the school, a review of an alternative policy. In this particular case, for geographic attendance areas, the median income of the area, and also the composition of the proposed area, if it seemed logical, made sense, was near the school, was contiguous, and then potential impacts on the surrounding schools and those school communities. So our first request, New Song Academy, is a school that's converting to charter status for school year 2020-2021. And thereby becoming a citywide school. So one of the key elements of their programming is that they're serving the residents of the Sandtown-Winchester community. As such, they're hoping to be able to maintain some geographic preference. So they requested 30% of families that live in the proposed zone, which is primarily in the Sandtown-Winchester neighborhood, but it's not perfectly aligned. The other schools that fall within that zone are the go back, the Matthew A. Henson Elementary and Harlem Park Elementary Middle. As you can see from the map here, though, the majority of the area is within the Sandtown-Winchester Achievement Academy zone. Each of those dots represents a student location. An important consideration in this request is that Newsong is proposing more than doubling their enrollment as they convert to charter status, and they're exploring building options that will accommodate that request, going up to 360 seats by their 4th year as a charter school. Currently, they serve 173 students. Here we go. So in examining their waiver request, the entire zone falls at equal to or less than $30,000 median income. So it meets the state requirements for median income. They currently have a wait list of 120 students, so there is demand for placement at their school. And we also spent a lot of time examining what the impact on the surrounding schools would potentially be. So Sandtown-Winchester Achievement Academy, as I mentioned, is the largest school zone impacted. They're pre-K to 8, and they currently serve 411 students. The other 2 schools, while it's only small portions of the GAA, Matthew A. Henson has a current enrollment of 313 students, and Harlem Park has an enrollment of 293. So in looking at what this impact could look like by peak enrollment, in year 4, they would have an anticipated 360 students. So 30% of those seats would be 108 seats given to students in the geographic attendance area. So the top row in this table shows how many students reside in the GAA within each school zone. So 29 students from the Harlem Park zone, 170 from the Henson zone, and 842 students in the Sway zone, all within the GAA. And that's a total of over 1,000 students that fall within the GAA. Given that only, even at peak enrollment, 108 students of all of those students would be granted guaranteed seats, that's 10.37% of the potential applicants to receive GAA seats. So in breaking that down by zone, that would equate to 3 students from the Harlem Park zone receiving guaranteed seats, 18 from the Henson zone, 87 from the Sway zone. And so comparing that against last year's numbers of enrollment, 7 students that attended Newsong last year came from the Harlem Park zone, 12 from the Henson zone, 102 from the Sway zone, which was at last year combined Gilmore and Pinderhughes. So there were a total of 121 students coming from that particular zone last school year. So by peak enrollment, the total number of students would be 108, which is still lower than the enrollment they had from the area before. So it shows that we determined it doesn't really create a new impact on the neighboring schools and their enrollment. So staff recommendation, which has been vetted by the Charter and Operator-Led School Advisory Board, is to approve the request at 30%. They can come close to maintaining their current enrollment from students who reside in the neighboring area, primarily Sandtown-Winchester. And they're still allowing over 250 seats for other students citywide with their proposed expansion. The goal of the school and the operator was to serve families in the Sandtown-Winchester neighborhood, and without having a negative impact on the surrounding schools. That's how we came to our recommendation to approve the request. The next 2 waiver requests are also, they're new, same in 2015, for lottery weights for students who are English language learners and who are experiencing economic disadvantage. These are brand new. So these come from Clay Hill Public Charter School, and they first submitted a request to give 35% enrollment preference to families who identify as economically disadvantaged, and the second waiver requests a 15% enrollment preference for English language learners. The key considerations are the same as we discussed before, less the median income and the area, the zone, as this is in a geographic attendance area. So some considerations we looked at are that Patterson Park Public Charter, Inc., the operator of Clay Hill Public Charter, engaged with stakeholders deeply, with community associations, families, public events, to get input on their school design, and a large part of that was in enrollment, which initially led them to the geographic attendance area. But the proposed area didn't meet median income requirements, so in an attempt to still serve a similar population as what they were hoping they would get with the GAA, they decided to suggest preference for economic disadvantage and English language learners. The operator has a track record of success with Patterson Park Public Charter School, and they've also have experience implementing preferences with the Patterson Park Public Charter Lottery and running an effective lottery process. This one's a little bit more complicated. Staff tentatively recommends approving each preference with the caveat that this is the first waiver request of this kind, and we're staff seeking legal advice on the rules to ensure that all factors are considered, as the way the law is written is very vague. Do you want to go through the appendix?
Are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Come back.
Mr. Alvarez, with New Song, are they considering finding another location?
Yeah,
Will it be outside of the Sandtown, or they're looking for a location within that community?
They're interested in procuring the Gilmore Building from the
Okay.
city. So that's the building they're hoping to. They also own some other property that's currently row homes that are near their current location. So they have a mix of options
Okay.
that they're considering.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'm going to be reviewing the consent agenda. This is not a time when we're going to be voting, but just going to go through some of these items based on public comment. When we come back, if you may want to make some changes to them, we'll vote at that time. So the first set of items would be 8.01. I believe there was a request for that to be pulled. That is the threat assessment second reader policy. Okay, 8.02, City Schools ESSA Consolidated Strategic Plan. 8.03, Policy KCD Gifts and Donations second reader. 8.04, Contract Extension CUB. 8.05, Contract Extension Local 44. 8.06, Contract Extension Pizzazza. Then we have Procurement 12.01, Concentric Educational Solutions. 12.02, Leaders for Tomorrow Youth Center. That was a request to be pulled. And I believe that is it. All right? Okay. So, let's see. We are now moved to public comment, and the first set of folks that we have under our special groups is Ms. Peggy Gladden from Baltimore Teachers Union.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, and CEO. I'm representing Ms. Diamante Brown, President of the Baltimore Teachers Union. We have been informed that there are surplus teachers. When there are issues like surplus teachers, surplus PSRPs, and transfer fares, BTU should be notified sooner than later. On the same note, Baltimore City Public Schools need to do a much better job of allocating staff at the beginning of the school year so we don't have these problems moving staff in October or November. Over the years, our members have been troubled having achievement units documented and paid at a reasonable time. For example, if 3 AUs are earned over the summer, someone can wait as long as November to have them credited. Clearly, there needs to be more staff working on this so AUs can be credited and paid much sooner. In preparation of the winter and summer months, it is our understanding that BCPS is installing heating and air conditioning units in individual classrooms. We applaud this effort to make sure students and staff are comfortable. Finally, BTU will continue to work at Annapolis to get the current commission fully funded to bring so much needed funds to Baltimore City schools. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Ms. Gladden. Thank you. Now, I don't see where any of the other recognized groups have signed up, but I'm just checking to make sure there is no one from one of those groups here. And seeing no one, our first person who has signed up for the general public comment is Ms. Veris Lee.
Good evening. I'm here to give a response to for the Board of Directors, NACA's Board of Directors official response to Baltimore City Public Schools recommendation for non-renewal of NACA 2. The Northwood Apple Community Academy Freedom and Democracy Public Charter Schools Board of Directors hereby submits this letter of reprimand and formal notice that the Baltimore City Public School System is in breach of contract. Since our NACA 2 renewal won in 2016, Baltimore City Public School System has unilaterally abdicated and violated the Baltimore City Public Schools NACA 2 agreement contract approximately 90 times in the areas of governance, instructional autonomy, and school climate. Baltimore City Public Schools recommendation for non-renewal and the current status of NACA 2 is a direct result of Baltimore City Public Schools' consistent, intentional, and unflinching contractual violations. Baltimore City Public Schools' recommendation for non-renewal is the direct result of Baltimore City School System's de facto control of NACA 2. Baltimore City's de facto control of the school is contrary to the aforementioned Baltimore City Public Schools contract agreement, NACA 2 agreement, and Baltimore City Public School Board policy, and State of Maryland Charter School law. Therefore, the recommendation for non-renewal does not belong to NACA Board of Directors. The recommendation for the non-renewal belongs to the Baltimore City Public Schools. The record and the history of matters must be clear. Student achievement and status and operation of NACA-2 represented in the two different charts demonstrates the difference between NACA's Board of Directors, NOB's operating NACA-2, and the district's BCPS operating NACA-2. As a result of Baltimore City's public schools' constant interference, student opportunities to learn and excel have been violated and harmed egregiously and repeatedly. NACA Board of Directors will engage necessary sources, channels, and remedies to obtain justice for our students, parents, staff, and leadership. Respectfully, NACA Board of Directors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a copy of that for us?
Yes,
Ms.
I
Lee?
do.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Sekou Kasumu?
Madam Chair, Dr. Santelisa's board members, we have a serious situation at Douglas High School. We have a student who just arrived at the school in September and is constantly out of control. She has, that better? Okay. She has serious emotional, behavior, and I suspect mental health issues. She has threatened to stab a staff member. She has an IEP. The staff member that she threatened to stab has an IEP student, and they share the same classroom 3-4 times a day. She has been known to carry knives. She has been caught with knives twice, and she says she always bring a knife to school. This girl needs to be removed before it's too late. Now, we didn't have an incident back in February where a staff member was shot because of a lack of security. This particular staff member is an alumni of Douglas like myself. She was there before the shooting, and she stayed after the shooting. She is committed to our school and our students, and we need to do what we need to do to separate that student, because she was there when the student came, and it wouldn't be fair to move her. But that student needs to be dealt with, because it's one thing. I get challenged all the time by guys I be searching, finding a wad of money in their pocket, and they got on an ankle bracelet. I say, I know exactly what you're doing, but you're not going to do it here. I ought to pluck you, old man. Yeah, and then I'm going to beat you up, right? But then that's just a threat of physical violence, like smacking or punching, right? But when somebody threatens to shoot you or stab you, and they've been known to carry those kind of weapons like this particular student, something needs to be done real fast before it's too late. Now, the staff member in question, she has not been satisfied with the response from the administration as far as at the school, because they keep saying, well, our hands are tied, we doing as much as we can do. No, she needs to be removed forthwith before she actually stabs this lady. I've seen her and having a conference with the vice principal, pick up a chair and throw it at this lady. She is out of control, and they are not equipped to handle her. She has serious mental, psychological, and emotional problems, and something needs to be done before it's too late.
So, one, it's always good to see you. Thank you for coming by. What I'm going to ask, because I don't want to get into the details, I have a number of questions, but I don't want to get into back and forth now. Can you please circle with Chief Davis on some of the particulars around the staff member, the student, and who you've spoken to up until this point, so that then I can follow up with Chief Davis around it? Could you do that for me, please, sir?
Chief Davis
Is right here.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. And our last speaker is Melissa Schober.
Good evening. Since the adoption of the equity policy, which I congratulate the board for, and the adoption, sorry. Is this any better? Okay, bigger mom voice. Got it. Since the adoption of the equity policy, which I congratulate this board for, and the blueprint, which mentions restorative district and restorative practices in a number of places, I wanted to know how this board and ILEDs are supervising the application of that policy and the blueprint to individual schools. As the recent parent of a middle schooler now, who's in a school that claims to be a restorative school, I've seen a number of critical areas of concern. And I know that this body and the school system is partnering with OSI and IRP and Acabin and Castle to get that work done, and it is hard, difficult work to do. But among my many concerns are that Castle's own model, which is adopted in the blueprint, talks about the need to lessen punitive responses in the classroom to build trust. And what I see going on in my own child's school and in other schools is that there's a bifurcated approach where students are expected to be vulnerable in a circle, but then also penalized through class dojo points or other punitive measures and removed from field trips, isolated, away from peers, without explanation, even though they have participated in a restorative practice. So we are teaching children to come to the table and be vulnerable, but then also to be punished additionally for that. And in terms of the equity policy, we're seeing demerits and punishment of students who take city MTA bus for lateness and tardiness. Now, I will fully admit sometimes it is very difficult to get out the door in the morning, but I know my own child's route to school, the 95 bus, has been on time since September 3rd, 65.5% of the time, and that's with a 7-minute window of lateness or 2 minutes early considered on time by MTA. So it's a 9-minute window. And again, most routes in the city that are ferrying children to these middle school programs and to high school are on time around 60 to 70% of the time at best. So we're penalizing students who do not have access to private vehicles, and that is an equity issue that I don't see happening coming from the leadership here, down to ILEDs, down to principals. Same with unexcused absences. Students who do not have health insurance cannot produce a doctor's note, and when we tell parents and students that they need to produce that note when they do not have access to care and there is not a school-based health center in the school, again, another difficult issue, we punish them for measures that are outside their control. So again, I was very supportive of the equity policy when it came before the board, but raise significant questions. Is it going to be more than paper? And that's what I'm asking tonight. When is it going to be more than paper, where we see a true application and where the blueprint and restorative practices are done in a way that is conforming with the model with fidelity and not what individual principals think the model should be?
Thank you, Ms. Schober. All right, now I'm going to move back to the consent agenda and ask if there is a motion to approve that agenda. Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Reed. All those in, I'm sorry, I need to, pardon me, I'm going to break it up. Items 8.2 and 8.3 of that agenda, let me do that first. I still have, if I had the same two, and I'm doing those for the student vote. Sorry about that, okay? So Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Reed, and that's for items 8.02, the ESSA Consolidated Plan and Policy KCD, second reader. All those in favor? Chinya? Is it 9? Thank you. One absent. And now the remaining portions of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve those? Commissioner Bondima, second by Commissioner Frank. All those in favor, please. Kenya. And now that's 8, 2 absent. 1 absent, I don't count the student. Thank you. All right. Now I'm going to go back to the ones that were pulled, right? And the first one is 8.01, which is policy JLJ, the threat assessment second reader. And I believe, do we want the presentation, or there were some questions? If you would come forward, there were some questions Commissioner Hassan posed, and since she's from the policy committee is not here, we're having another member of that committee just to share those questions.
James Torrance, Staff Specialist for Strategy and Compliance.
Good evening, Deborah Brooks, Executive Director of Special Education.
Good evening, Lori Hines, Director of Student Conduct and Attendance.
Thank you. So we think it might be, or I guess I'm saying, I'm asking that you all consider sending this policy back for a third reader. Representatives from Disability Rights Maryland still have some concerns, even though staff has been very responsive and helpful to them. Language, and some of the comments. Language usage that does not consistently align with COMAR. Language usage that does not consistently align with federal law. Issues of due process that limit options and possibilities for students with disabilities. For example, if 2 students exhibit the same behaviors, but one has an IEP, and depending on it being a manifestation of their disability, they may not have the same rights to alternate placements or not as a student without a recognized disability. And sending it to third reader does not prohibit it moving forward in the near future. Advocates are realistic in their role and are not looking for the world. They simply believe that it will give them the time to provide support and make it a stronger policy with less unintended negative consequences.
Thank you, Commissioner. I can offer a response.
I'm going to have to ask, there is either all the mics or we all have bad ears, but just speak a little louder.
Yes, ma'am. I'll lean in a little further. To offer a response that we are receptive to the concerns of Disability Rights Maryland. We recognize that some of the questions outlined are actually more so dedicated to JKA, the policy. And we're willing to work with them on the language in that as well. So we're willing to actually go back through and talk to them about their concerns because there might be some confusion in the actual questions.
So what Mr. Torrance is referring to is we're actually working with Disability Rights Maryland on 2 different policies. And so some of the concerns that they outlined were actually for the other policy that we were working with. And so there was some confusion on the 2 policies. So we will go back and make sure that the alignment is for the correct policy.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add, we have met with Disability Rights and we have incorporated their previous suggestions. What you were reading, the suggestions, we received that after this policy was submitted to legal for review. And so now that the request is to review these additional recommendations, we can certainly do that now. But I just did want to note that we have met with them. We did take into consideration their recommendations and we implemented it after the first reader. But since that time, since again that it's been submitted to legal, we have received additional recommendations from Disability Rights.
Wonderful. Sounds like you're way ahead of me. Thank you.
So I do have a question then. So are you all 3 saying that it should go to third reader then to give you time to do some more work with Disability Maryland? Or, because I thought what I heard was that the concerns that Commissioner Berkeley outlined were for a different policy.
They
right?
were, but we want to work with the advocate to understand that to add the clarity so that we make sure that these two policies are not misconstrued together, because the threat assessment policy is a preventative policy, not punitive, so there should be no due process, whereas the JKA requires a due process because there's a consequence. We just want to make sure that we're clear and make sure that if it's confusing to the advocates, we want to make sure that we can clarify for the public as well. We're being very considerate and making sure that we get this right.
Then based on that, Commissioner Richardson?
All right, then I'll make a motion that we defer draft policy JLJ, threat assessment, for further study and review and approve a third reading at the next board meeting on December 10th, 2019.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner McFadden. All those in favor?
Richardson.
Chinya? 8. Correct. 1 absent. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe the other item that we pulled was 12.02, which is Leaders for Tomorrow Youth Center. Were there specific questions that folks had for this one?
You have a question? Okay. For the record, I just wanted, and I would imagine for the public, I want you all to outline the changes that were made from our last board meeting to tonight so that we're real clear about what we're voting on tonight as it relates to this contract.
Joe Vogel, Interim Director of Procurement. The board letter as written tonight is requesting the board's approval for a contract from September 1 through January of 2020 with a 5-month potential option, and looking for a level of evidence for that from LTYC. The prior letter was for a 3-year contract.
Right.
Thank you, Joe. I just, for the record, I just want to also express to anyone that's doing business with the district that we take these contracts seriously, and especially when you are providing a service to our students, that asking to see some evidence of effectiveness it's not a bad thing, right? And so we want our vendors to be prepared and to know how to do that and to provide us the information on a timely basis. And so thank you for taking another look at this contract, and thank you for the adjustments that you all have made.
All right. So is there a motion to accept this contract? Commissioner Brooks, second. Commissioner McFadden, were you shaking? Okay, Commissioner McFadden. All those in favor? Chinya?
McFadden. Brooks.
And that's 8, 1 absent. Okay, thank you. I believe we are now moving into another information and discussion item, which is the annual portfolio review for 2019-2020 recommendations.
All right. Good evening. I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives.
And I'm Lindsay Anderson. I'm a specialist in the Office of New Initiatives.
I'm Rachel Pfeiffer. I'm the Executive Director of College and Career Readiness.
So the recommendations we are about to share represent a lot of different, the work of a lot of different offices, academics, and several departments within academics, special ed, 21st century, our 21st century office, our facilities and office, design and construction, our family community engagement, our Office of Achievement and Accountability, our communications office, our family engagement office. So there's a lot of work behind each of these points. So I just want to start by acknowledging the various offices that support this work. It's a heavy lift and involves a lot of staff, time and effort. It's serious. We take it very seriously. The goal behind these recommendations are always about what we can do to maximize our resources to serve students best. So I just kind of want to start with that frame, more to say as we go into the presentation. But I wanted to just start by acknowledging a lot of the work by the team.
So we're going to start just by briefly talking about new additions to the portfolio this year. In the fall 2019, we opened 2 new buildings, Arlington Elementary School and the Reach Partnership School opened in the Fairmount Hartford building. This January, we have 3 additional 21st century buildings opening, Calvin and Rodwell Elementary Middle School, John Rura Elementary Middle School, and Baybrook Elementary Middle School. We also have 2 charter schools that will be opening for next year. Clay, that you heard about earlier tonight, Clay Hill Public Charter School is operated by Patterson Park Public Charter School, Inc., and will be located in southeast Baltimore. They'll be opening, serving grades K through 4 in fall 2020, and then will eventually grow to serve grades K through 8. The New Song Academy is located in the Sandtown Winchester neighborhood. It's a current New Schools Initiative school that will be converting to a charter school. They serve grades pre-K through 8, and their enrollment will be growing from, as you heard about earlier, from 173 to 360 students.
Thank you. We want to highlight some changes in our high school programming. So one of the things that we have taken a closer look at is our CTE programming, and specifically what we are providing students in order to help prepare them for career. As we presented in June, we partnered with a group called Education Strategy Group to help us take a deeper look into our CTE programming, our career and technology education programming that is helping our students pursue specific career pathways. One of the things that came out of the audit that they did for us was that many of the programs that we have here at the district are not necessarily aligned with in-demand, high-wage, high-skilled jobs that we know that our students need when they graduate. We have also found that our students were not earning many of the certifications that they were supposed to earn at the end of the courses. And so that really led us to do a deeper dive into our CTE programming and how we are preparing our students for careers. So you look here, this is one of the key findings, as I mentioned, about the alignment of the programming that we have with in-demand, high-skill, high-wage jobs in the Baltimore metropolitan area. As you see in the yellow rectangle, those are the careers on the left side, the left column, that are industry aligned, that show that alignment with those careers that pay a living wage. And on the right side, we see the pathways that we have, many of which have high enrollment, that are not providing or preparing students for those careers that we know will pay them a living, family-supporting wage. So part of our work is to help figure out how we can increase the number of programs that are in that left column that are aligned to those jobs that will pay family-supporting wages, and what we might do, whether it's to decrease or to transform the career clusters that are on the right-hand side that are unaligned, in order to help them be more aligned in a way that would prepare students more effectively to earn a living wage when they leave. So there were 5 key recommendations that came out from Education Strategy Group when they finished their review. And the categories start with alignment, as I just mentioned, how we align our programming to those occupations in this area that will pay students well. Secondly, looking at the quality of the programming that we are providing, specifically to see whether those programs would help students earn post-secondary college credit by going through the courses, or whether students would be able to earn an industry-recognized credential with an employer saying that if a student passes this exam, for instance, or is able to achieve this benchmark, we trust that they are ready and we would want to bring them in as our employees. Third category that they recommended was that we really work closely with the employer community to ensure that students have work-based learning experiences. We know that actually working being in an industry setting is very different than being in a classroom, and we want to be able to provide our students with more of those experiences, and we need to partner closely with the employer community in order to do that. The fourth category was looking at access, and they suggested that we look really closely at how students are advised about CTE programming and how we think through how students are placed into that programming. We currently have these career programs in just about all of our high schools. And so thinking through how students and their families get information about where the programs are located, what programs are available to them. The final area where they had a recommendation was in the area of equity. And in particular, they noted that as our programs have developed over the years, more of our students who were stronger academically were landing in programs that were preparing students to earn a living wage, as I showed earlier, those programs that were more aligned to in-demand, high-wage, high-skilled jobs, and our students who were performing less well academically were not getting access to those programs that were preparing students to enter occupations that were paying a living wage. And their recommendation was that we looked very closely at that and look at how we can increase the number of programs that are aligned to high-wage occupations across schools that are open access. Yes?
I guess first is a question and the second one's an observation. I mean, last time we went through the findings in terms of the lack of success in CTEs. One was they couldn't get the jobs, and two, their salaries were pretty abysmal.
That's right.
What's your degree of optimism based on the recommendations going forward?
That we can turn around the salaries that students earn and their
they can have a life. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that what I'd respond to that by saying that there are very clear things we know that we can do to start to help students make those connections. So part of it is looking at work-based learning really closely. How do we give students those real-life opportunities, real-life experiences to be in an industry environment? Because just coming from a classroom is insufficient. We know that internships are very important for students and that they're even more important for students coming from low-income backgrounds, right? So we know that they're even more important for students of color. So giving our students work-based learning opportunities is not just a nice to have, but the way that we're looking at it is that it is something that we need to figure out how we implement systematically so that our students start to make those connections, because some of getting a job is having the network. And part of building that network is being able to be in those settings. I think the other piece that I think we know that we can adjust is actually what we're teaching our students. So if we know that we are preparing students for occupations where they're unlikely to make a living wage, then we're kind of setting ourselves up. So part of the conversation with employers is to say, what skills do students need to come out with? in order for you to pay them a living wage? And then how do we back map that to develop curriculum that helps our students get prepared accordingly? If we do those things among the others that are up there, I think that we'll be on a much better path and that our students won't continue to see the same low income levels.
Okay. And I guess the other one is, you probably want to do this for Commissioner Bundina. The next slide, you want to put a D in Edmondson?
Oh,
No.
In the next slide.
Thank you.
thank you. Okay.
OMG.
There's a typo that we'll go back and fix. I appreciate it. So to that point where we need to add a D in Edmondson. This is a pretty significant shift that I want to highlight. Starting as a result of the information that we received through the Education Strategy Group report, long-term conversations that we've been having as a district about equity and increasing access for students who've systematically been denied it over time. Starting in school year 2021-22, we are going to, we will no longer consider composite scores as part of the choice process for students who are actually going into 9th grade at Carver Vocational Technical High School, at Edmondson Westside High School, and at Mergenthaler Vocational Technical High School. What this will do is it will ensure greater access to these programs, many of which are unique CTE programs at these CTE centers. And it will give access in particular to students with disabilities who, again, have systematically, as a group, though there are individual circumstances that may be different, as a group they have been denied access to these schools because of the entrance criteria and composite score cutoffs that have been on these schools for the last several decades.
Also, before we move off of that conversation about high school, that also sits in a larger framework around a high school strategy that we've been partnering on developing, and we'll be reaching out to members of the public to help us kind of re-envision and reimagine what our high schools need to look like and what the experience needs to feel like for students to be successful across the board. So this sits within a broader context, and it's about the whole experience of the child and really putting all of our students on a path towards those family-sustaining wages, and keeping in mind equitable access to schools as well as to the programs that we offer within our schools. So it's part of a broader conversation.
And Angela, if I could just add, as we think through this, we're also looking at what systematic supports that we will need to put in place for our students, to your point, Commissioner Reed, to be successful in our CTE programming, in preparing them to be successful in careers across the board, and as we make these changes in these three particular schools. So these changes are happening, but right now the conversation is what are the systems of support that we need to put in place in order to make those changes effective and beneficial for all involved.
All right, so I'm going to take us back in time briefly. So in school year 2012-13, we had an ambitious plan, that had broad community support to fix our facilities, right? And the premise of that, and it's a premise that's still a fact today, is that every child in our system deserves to be in a quality building, period. And we had certain guiding principles that were at the beginning of that plan, and we've used as we've been implementing that plan over time. To invest, to support academic success for all students, that's what our facilities should be doing for them. To be fiscally responsible and good stewards of our resources. To engage school communities in the creation of what goes into those buildings for their students. To align the school buildings with the demographic trends and enrollment trends and parent and student choices. To maximize impact for community stability and growth and development. To provide diverse options in every geographic area of the city, and to create school buildings that were supportive of technology and environmental stability and sustainability. Part of what fed that plan was the Jacobs report. So the Jacobs report was released in school year 11-12. So again, that's based on data that was almost a decade old to inform that plan. And the major findings are still kind of a fact today, that a majority of our buildings are old and out of date. At that time, we were utilizing 65% of our school space. Under the 21st Century Plan, we have 12 schools housed in new facilities. We have 3 more opening in January, so January will be our halfway point to the 14 buildings. The remaining 28 buildings will open by 2023, and that's 32 schools that are impacted by that plan. 12 elementary schools, 14 elementary middle schools, 2 middle highs, and 4 high schools. In the original plan, we sequenced every school in a order from year 1 to year 10. Because again, our goal, our hope is to eventually be able to place every child into a quality building and a quality programming. And so this is the list of schools that were scheduled for year 3 under that original plan that's based on in part based on the Jacobs report. A lot has changed with our district and has been changing over time. You know, we've talked often, and it's been often a big factor that we consider is what's happening with our enrollment trends across the district. So that's been a factor. And other things have changed in terms of our focus. Like we now have an AC plan so that schools who currently don't have AC will have AC under that plan. So there's a proposal for every school that doesn't have AC to have it through that plan. And we didn't have that at the time that the 21st Century Plan was adopted. And some of the schools themselves are getting improvements through some other funding source or have already received some improvements. So for example, when you looked at that original list, it included Brems Lane, which is now the Bel Air Edison School. Brems Lane at that time was a traditional school. It's now a charter school. That operator has invested in that facility. It still has needs, so I'm not saying that, but they've invested in that facility so it feels different for staff and students in terms of their experience within that building. And our facilities team has has capital work, roof project going on right now as part of our CIP in that building. City Springs was on that list. City Springs is being renovated by the city as part of its Choice Neighborhood Initiative. Gilmore was on that list. Gilmore closed in the summer of 2019 when they merged with the Penderhughes program and became the Sandtown Winchester Achievement Academy. The name of the program selected by the students. It was the students' favorite choice selected by the community. And our facilities team put investments within that building with our Heart of America and Under Armour, and have substantially created a space that feels very different for staff and students within that space. And I talked about the AC plan already. Additionally, some of those schools that were on there are no longer open. Northeast Middle closed in 2015. West Baltimore is also closed. It's been a building that we've been using for swing space. So you can see just by looking at that order doesn't make sense given where we are and what our current needs are. There is a potential that's before us, and we're going to need everybody that is listening to this, whether you're in this room or you're listening online or you're listening on Channel 77, we're going to need your support. Last year, there was a bill that was proposed that would have given us $400 million in additional facilities funding. We believe in this upcoming legislative session, there would be a similar bill to give us that amount of money. In our current pot that's established in the 21st Century Plan, we have money that is set aside to do 5 additional feasibility studies on 5 buildings. And so we've struggled with a question. Do you select 8 to 10 elementary and elementary middle buildings that are serving isolated neighborhoods among the 100 or so remaining facilities that need improvement? Or do you focus on 5 to 8 high schools when we have about 20 high schools that need serious investment or improvement? And when you look at high schools, we're almost there. So I want to explain how we get to 20. We have 36 programs serving high school students. This includes middle, high, and high school programs. And 16 of them have already had some work done. 6 of them have or will be completed under 21st Century, under the current plan. Some were prior renovations, so if you think about digital, you think about Dunbar, for example. Some partners have invested with us in, like Design School, or operators have invested in schools, like City Neighbors High School, Green Street Academy. So that's how we get to this list of almost there. And there's been work, because it's not just about buildings, I want to emphasize this, it's about the academic, again, quality education and a quality facility. Facility is communicating and impacts everything about learning and how a student feels in school. So this is always about the whole thing and every child. One of the things that we consider, and we talk about equity and we mean that, is the communities in which our schools are housed, as well as the communities from which our students come to schools with. And so one of the things we considered when we look at those 16 facilities, using our community conditions index that Dr. Stewart developed in our Office of Planning, what kinds of communities are the schools housed in? And so the stars represent those 16 schools, and you can see they're across communities of that have different access to resources. So, and we're talking about community resources, the communities in which the schools reside. So schools in red, or communities in red, are places where there's less access to community resources like transportation. There's higher crime, lower median income, less access to food, those sorts of things. Those areas in dark green have higher access to those kinds of things. And so you can see there's a spread among those schools in the 16 schools that we were talking about. I mentioned how 6 of them are addressed in our current stage in 21st Century. So that's Forest Park High School, Academy for College and Career Exploration, or as we often refer to it, ACE, Independence High School Local 1, the Reach Partnership School. And so those 4 are open, with Reach being the newest high school to open this fall. And then Patterson High School and Claremont are on its way. In figuring out what to focus on, we consider these factors: the success of the school and the ability for improvement, because we're talking about investing a lot of resources, so these need to be schools that are going to be around. Access and quality and distribution of school programming, so that students have access to the programming. School enrollment and school size. School location and proximity to students. So we looked at how long students are traveling to and from to get to school. Building utilization and condition. So the facilities that we narrowed down have some of the highest needs for us in the district. They're the most expensive in terms of repair costs. Proximity to 21st century school building projects that are elementary or elementary middle programs. So we're doing all this work to change what's happening academically within schools. Where are they going for high school next? Sustainability and school legacy, and the ability to leverage partnerships to improve outcomes for students and potentially make the dollars go further. We decided to focus the feasibility studies and potentially this pot of money on high schools because we wanted to impact as many students across as many communities as possible. Our high schools are citywide, so they're serving across multiple communities. We want to take seriously this high school strategy work that we're talking about and the recommendations from the CTE report. If we're going to have buildings that can actually support those high wage, high growth, then we need to do work to make the buildings be able to support those programs. Additionally, our high schools are large. They serve more students. So again, maximize the impact of the number of students. And so with the next set that we're proposing and the schools that already are in good shape and have had significant work done, we can create a possibility where virtually every student could have had an opportunity to be in one of these facilities by the time they graduate from city schools. And the last thing is that our facilities, our high school facilities in particular, are extremely expensive to fix. They're much more expensive to fix than our elementary and elementary middle school programs, and they're more expensive than the amount of money we get annually for the district for capital projects. So I want to give an example. So we receive $29 million in capital improvement funds each year from the state to repair just the systems, and I'm talking about just like HVAC or roof, those kind of systems within a Baltimore City College High School, for example, would cost $44 million, are much more than what we receive in regular capital funds from the state each year. And so if we're going to, at any point ever, address the needs of high school, this is the way to do it. And so that's why we want to focus on high schools. Before I get into the list of schools, I want to say this about this list. So we considered all the things that I talked about at the beginning. Within this list, we have, because this is also about legacy, and it's about equity in a lot of ways. So I want to start, before we look at this list, reminding us of a few things. So one of the schools that you're going to see in this list is the second oldest public high school that was built for African Americans in the United States. We have to fix this. Another school on this list is the oldest public high school for girls in the United States. And it was a school that was a segregated school that's now majority, over 90% African American. We have to fix this. Another school on this list is the third oldest public high school in the United States. Another school on this list is one of the oldest high schools in the United States, starting in 1883. This is about the entire city. This is about our legacy as a district. We have to fix this. And before I get into the list, the other thing I want to remind the public is when we received the 21st Century funding, we did something that most places do not do. We focused on our under-resourced communities where we knew we were going to have to close schools because of the challenges that those communities are facing with enrollment and with people moving out. Those were the schools that we did first. We intentionally did that. And so we have new schools in Pimlico, Fairmount Harford, which is in the Northeast, Frederick in Southwest Baltimore. We have Cherry Hill. We have 2 21st Century schools in Cherry Hill community. So we're serious. Like we adopted an equity policy that's serious, but we've been about it before we put it in writing. And we have a lot more to do. We've got a lot of work to do to get there, but we've been about this, and we're serious about this. And I want everybody to understand that we care deeply about our students, and we care about their success. And that's the driver behind this. So 32 schools are already part of the existing funding. Feasibility studies, if you approve this, will begin on these schools in January. And we will renovate as many of these buildings as we can in this order based on the amount of funding that's available to us and how much it costs to renovate each school. The feasibility studies will tell us what it takes to improve each building and how much it costs. And so this is in a order. So 32, so the 33rd school that we would touch under this is Douglas High School, and the 34th is Joseph C. Briscoe Academy, which is a separate public day school, because that's the other community we've been intentional about supporting in this plan. Under this proposal, we want to explore creating a shared campus like we've done with Patterson and Claremont, or Lois T. and Walter P. Carter, to house both schools separately on a shared campus to benefit all of those students. The 35th school would be Baltimore City College High School, third oldest public high school in the United States. That's the one I was talking about. Douglas second oldest African-American high school in the United States. The 36 and 37 schools are Baltimore Polytechnic High School and Western High School. Again, all of these schools serve a majority of African-American students. Many of these schools, City College, Polytech, Western, were segregated schools in the past. We have to fix this. The 38th and 39th school on our list is the Vivian T. Medical Arts Academy and Bluford Drew Jemison STEM, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm stumbling over my words, but Bluford Drew Jemison STEM Academy West, and explore again a shared campus at at Francis M. Wood, which is the current location of Vivian T. And then the 40th on our list is Edmondson Westside High School. We're now going to go into the regular recommendations that are part of our annual portfolio review. So just a quick summary, we have one proposed closure for a traditional school, one proposed closure for a separate public day school, one proposal to change a grade configuration, 2 building surpluses, 4 amendments to the 21st Century Buildings Plan. Following that, we're going to get into operator renewal. So operator renewal is part of the regular cycle for charter and operator schools. We have 1 recommendation for an 8-year renewal, 3 recommendations for a 5-year renewals, 3 recommendations for 3-year renewals, 1 recommendation for a non-renewal and closure, and 1 pending additional information. So we are here tonight presenting publicly these recommendations. Letters went out to families regarding these recommendations. On Tuesday, December 3rd, there will be a COMOR hearing, which is an opportunity for community members to testify directly to you guys at the board. There will also be a second opportunity, a special work session on December 17th, and then you will make your final decisions on January 14th. Okay. So the first proposed closure is for Sarah M. Roach Elementary School. This is pursuant to the 21st Century Plan. So as part of that plan, so this is a public recommendation that's been pending for some time. As part of that plan, the recommendation is for Sarah M. Roach and for the school to merge with Mary E. Rodman. Both are small elementary programs that are in an area of the city where we don't have a need for 2 programs. There's not enough students to sustain both of them independently. Sarah M. Roach has continued to decline. They're under 200 students today, currently. And so if you approve this recommendation, the Mary E. Rodman zone will expand to encompass the former Sarah M. Roach Elementary zone. And additionally, with this, we're recommending that you vote, if you approve the vote on the closure, that Sarah M. Roach building would be surplus back to the city at the end in the summer of 2020, as we will no longer need it for educational use at that point. Mary E. Rodman is the program that's being built under the 21st Century Plan. This shows the enlarged zone. The orange students are Mary E. Rodman students, and the purple are the Sarah M. Roach students. The next recommendation for your consideration is the closure of the George W. F. McMecken High School program. It's a separate public day school. The timing of this is not the end of this year. The proposal is for the end of next school year. George McMecken is a small separate public day school, serves just under 50 students. As we've gotten better at meeting the needs of students within lesser restrictive environments, and as the needs of students have changed over time, we have less of a need for the number of separate public day schools that we have today. Additionally, McMecken, most separate public day schools serve students K through 12. We have different configurations within our district, and McMecken serves students in grades 9 through 12. So as students exit the program when they reach age 21, that puts pressure on such a small school. Additionally, they're housed in a facility that's not in great condition, and they only utilize 18% of the space. And so with that low utilization, it's very difficult to get approval to fix those spaces. And we think that we can better meet the needs of those students in our existing separate public day schools, in either William Bear for students, high school students needing this level of support, or Claremont, the Claremont School. And this is time for when Claremont moves into its new facility. So this would provide students from this population opportunity to be included within that new high school program, where there's access to CTE. Special Ed's working really hard to really improve how those programs function. So there's transition and greater access to learning to work experiences for students. So for when they, to have them have as great level, the greatest level of independence as is appropriate for each student. Additionally, the timing allows us to work individually with families. This is a vulnerable population, and we want to take our time to work with families and the potential receiving schools to ensure that they're ready and prepared, have met the families, understand the needs of the students, and that we have a careful plan around that. So that's also a factor in the timing that we're proposing under this recommendation. This map kind of shows the McMecken students where they live in relation to where McMecken is and where Bear is and where Claremont is today. We'll have to continue to monitor that. One of the big considerations for all students, but in particular for students attending separate public day schools, is the amount of time it takes them to travel to school. And so that's one of the big considerations too. We want to make sure they're going to the school that can meet their needs, that's closest to their house. The next is a grade change, grade configuration change recommendation. So Curtis Bay is currently an elementary middle school. The proposal is to make it only an elementary school starting next school year. This is pursuant to the 21st Century Plan as well. So Baybrook is the nearby program that is being rebuilt under 21st Century. Curtis Bay is overutilized. There's a lot of students that are squeezed into that facility. It's over 147% utilized today. So changing the grade configuration relieves that utilization. Additionally, Baybrook right now is about a 2-section middle school. Ideally, you want middle school to be 3 to 4 sections so that they can have a truer, closest to a truer middle school experience. And so this positions both schools for success and students for success. This is also an area of the city where we have a growing EL population. And so that pressure on the facility and making sure that there is space to accommodate the needs is an important consideration here. This shows the Curtis Bay middle grade students. Those are the orange dots. The purple are all the current Baybrook students. The Curtis Bay map is you don't see the full zone because it's near the water, so that's what you're not seeing, is the water. But this is where the students are. Additionally, we have some amendments for changes to Exhibit 6. Exhibit 6 is part of the MOU that guides the 21st Century Plan. It's the list of buildings, of 26 buildings we have to surplus according to a schedule per that plan. And so annually we make amendments. This year we're proposing to amend the timing of the surplus of the Southeast building. It was originally scheduled to surplus at the end of this year. We're proposing to push it back to 2024. We just still need it for swing space. We need it for Highlandtown and Commodore John Rogers. And so that's why we're going to keep it a little longer. The second school is Dr. Carter G. Woodson. It actually has systems that are shared with the Southside building where New Era is located. So we need time to separate the systems. And so we're proposing to move the surplus date back to 2022 to allow for that work to happen. Additionally, we want to remove a program from the Exhibit 6 and put another program on it. So we want to take off the Claremont building. We are potentially looking at using that as a satellite kitchen to meet our needs to get lunches to students. And so we want to be able to explore using that as a potential site for that usage. And so that's why we want to pull it off of Exhibit 6. In its place, we would put Grove Park, the Grove Park building on Exhibit 6. Grove Park is currently swing space for Calvin and Rodwell, which is being renovated under the 21st Century Plan. It's almost done. It opens in January. And so when they move into January, we no longer have an educational use for Grove Park. So we would want you to vote to surplus that building at the end of this year. And then for Claremont, that's time that we would look at that, keeping it once turning it into a kitchen once the students move into their new building. So just so that's really clear for members of the public. Additionally, this year we're doing something new. In addition to buildings that we have under our control as city schools, we have land parcels that are under our control. Historically, we transferred those parcels back to the city through an administrative process. Because we are committed to having greater transparency with the public, we want to actually have that done as part of this process moving forward, and then done in a public meeting at later times in the year should we determine we don't need parcels. These are small parcels of land. They're not large enough to serve like for athletic usage or anything like that. So I sort of talked about that. This is the list. This is printed in the recommendations book, which is online for people who want to look at closely. It was also will be in the newspaper tomorrow for people that want to look at it closely. But so there's plenty of places to look at the list closely if people have public comment on the land parcels that we are recommending that the board vote to surplus at the end of the year. And then the next thing is not a board action because this is about a temporary space. So this is within the CEO's prerogative. So this is just for a public notification. We right now have Vanguard Middle School located in the Thurgood Marshall building. That's been their temporary space for a few years. We still need to do work on the northeast building, which is identified as their permanent space. And so we need to delay moving them. They were scheduled to move at the end of this year. We need to delay moving them an additional year to allow time to get approval for a capital project to fix the facility. Okay. We're now going to move into operator renewal.
Good evening. I'm Trevor Roberts. I'm a specialist in the Office of New Initiatives. Operator renewal is a regular fact of the life of any charter or operator-led schools. Depending on the length of an operator's contract, comes up every 3, 5, or 8 years. When we're evaluating the performance of an operator, we look at 3 main areas: student achievement, school climate, and financial management and governance. Just a quick overview of this year's timeline. Schools submitted their applications for renewal in September. Through September and October, the Charter and Operator-Led Schools Advisory Board conducted a review of those applications. The Advisory Board made a recommendation to the CEO, and the CEO can either take the Advisory Board's recommendation or she can modify it. The CEO's recommendations are what we're going to be presenting tonight. And on December 5th, there will be a work session where operators and members of school communities can come and speak directly to the board. And on January 14th, the board will be voting on the recommendations.
And I just want to be really clear for members of the public, the work session time is designated for the operators. So each operator determines who from their community speaks with them or on their behalf. So it's not like the COMAR hearing in a special session where anybody can sign up. It's designed for because it's about their contract, it's designed for the operator to have an opportunity to speak directly to the board, and they select members of their community to come up with them.
So the first school we're going to be looking at tonight is Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys. It's operated by the Five Smooth Stones Foundation. They're currently located in a temporary facility in Northeast Baltimore. The recommendation is for a 3-year renewal with conditions, which we'll get into shortly. They were rated developing in all 3 of those areas that we look at: academics, climate, and financial management and governance. So the school is rated highly effective in park growth measures in math 6 through 8, and ELA 6 through 8, or developing in ELA 6 through 8, developing in math 3 through 5, and not effective in ELA 3 through 5. One thing to note as we go through these recommendations is that the park growth measure is the way that we look at park that has the most weight in the renewal rubric. So we look at park absolute performance, park trend performance, and growth is the most highly weighted measure.
Of the park measures, of the park scores, of of those 3.
School is rated effective in student attendance and chronic absence, and this is a measure that looks both at a school's data in that area and also practices that the school implements to address any challenges that they see in the data. One note here is that the school must continue to work in this area to make sure that all the practices and policies that they do implement are in compliance with district policy. And the school is rated developing in an operator capacity. As I said, this school is being recommended for a conditional renewal. Those conditions are in the areas of procurement of a facility, professional development for operator leadership, and training for staff and social emotional needs of students, and requirements for quarterly grade entry and other record-keeping processes.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to remind the board and members of the public is this is Collegiate's first renewal. So they're a new school, they're still a growing school, still learning. So the next is Bard High School Early College Baltimore, which is operated by Bard College. The recommendation tonight is pending. So they're effective in academic performance and effective in climate. From time to time, we may have a delay on getting certain financial information depending on the complexity of an organization. So Bard College is fairly complex in terms of its size and what it runs. So we'll update that once we have the additional information that we need to finalize the rating. They were rated highly effective in their absolute park performance for English language arts. They were in the 83rd percentile in terms of the poverty index, and as well as in Algebra 1, where they were also in the 83rd percentile. They're highly effective in college and career readiness, which considers participation and success in indicators of readiness for college, such as performance on SAT, performance on AP, IB, performance, whether or not their students are earning credits, those sorts of things. They're also effective. So we have a new measure that we're going to talk about. This is a new measure. We used to consider this as part of the Fidelity, the charter, part of the renewal rubric. So it's new for us to look at it independently. And so for each school, in the rating, we've given some poignant guidance to schools about how to continue to grow in this area. This is an area we're growing in as a district. And so we want to acknowledge that there's work that needs to be done to go further in how we really meet the needs of all of our students, particularly in very diverse schools. BARD was rated effective in effective programming for all student racial ethnic groups. Evidence shows, so this, similar to the chronic absence measure, is a measure that looks at both the data of what's happening with each of those individual student groups, over time and compared to the district, as well as the practices that the school has engaged in. And so this school has evidence of practices including rigorous grade level appropriate instruction. And the practices that we're looking at are practices that have shown to decrease gaps to improve achievement for all students. So that's where these practices come from. So that access to rigorous grade level appropriate instruction is one of those key kinds of practices. Their recruitment plan is based on trying to attract staff that is representative of their student body. And their student performance for their lower performing group is in the effective range, meaning above the 65th percentile in terms of performance. But however, in order for them to continue to be effective in this area, they have to continue to refine their practices and address the differences between achievement in student groups, because there are differences here. Again, this is a new measure that we have to grow and deepen our practice in, and as well as schools. They were also rated effective in programming for students with disability, which considers whether the school is showing trajectory of growth for students with disabilities in terms of their outcomes, that they're aware of their data, and that they have consistently implemented processes, interventions, and strategies that support the achievement of students with disabilities.
Our next school is City Neighbors High School, which is operated by City Neighbors High School Incorporated. The recommendation is for a 5-year renewal. School is rated effective in academic performance, highly effective in climate, and meets expectations, effective in financial management and governance. The school is highly effective in park achievement trend, which is looking at school-level park data and measuring changes in that over time. They were effective in 4-year cohort graduation rate, with an 89% graduation rate in 2018. In that effective programming for students in all racial ethnic groups that Angela was just speaking about, they're really developing. While they did have practices such as monitoring disaggregated student data, offering culturally relevant projects to students, and being mindful of the student body in recruitment of teachers and staff, in order to be rated effective in the future, they're going to have to raise the absolute performance of all students. While gaps between student groups at this school were small, absolute performance across the board needs improvement. And they were also rated highly effective in cohort retention, which measures the percentage of students who stay at the school for at least 2 years over time.
Next is Govins Elementary School. It's operated by the Baltimore Curriculum Project. It's received effectives in all 3 key areas. They're recommended for a 5-year renewal. They're highly effective in absolute performance on their park English language arts, scoring in the 97th percentile, and effective in math, scoring in the 76th percentile. They're effective in their park growth, which assesses changes in student achievement over time. For English language arts, they're in the 77th percentile. They were not effective in math, so that's an area of growth for them in the 40th percentile. They're highly effective in cohort retention, which measures the percentage of students who stay at the school at least 2 years after entry. They're highly effective in parent and staff satisfaction and effective in student satisfaction. They're effective in their programming for students with disabilities.
Lily Mae Carroll Jackson School, operated by Carroll's Charter School Incorporated, is being recommended for a 3-year renewal. They're rated developing in academic performance, effective in climate, and developing in financial management and governance. They're developing in park growth, in ELA 6 through 8 in the 54th percentile, and not effective in math 6 through 8 in the 39th percentile. Not effective in absolute performance in park in ELA 6 through 8 and math 6 through 8. They were rated effective in fidelity to charter, which is a measure of the extent to which the school has fully implemented the mission outlined in its charter. The stakeholders understand that mission, and the school addresses any challenges in data, particularly in areas of enrollment, student attendance, dropout rates, attrition, and student choice data. They were rated effective in student attendance, chronic absence, which again looks at both data and practices in that area.
The next school is NACA2 Freedom and Democracy Academy. They are operated by the Northwood DePaul Community Academy Incorporated. They're recommended for a non-renewal and closure at the end of this school year. They were not effective in academic performance. They were rated not effective in financial management and governance, and they're developing in climate. They're not effective in park growth, which again is looking at student achievement over time. For English language arts in grades 6 through 8, they're in the 10th percentile. In math, 6 through 8, they're in the 25th percentile. They're not effective in absolute park performance. In English language arts in the 4th percentile. In math, for middle grades, they're in the 19th percentile. And in Algebra 1, they're in the 14th percentile. They were effective in ELA, scoring in the 71st percentile for that particular measure. They're not effective in their 4-year cohort grad rate with a 66.7% graduation rate. They're also not effective in operator capacity, indicating the school has had difficulty operating effectively as an operator and meeting state or federal or district reporting requirements and critical district, or federal obligations. There's been a myriad of issues from their management of Title I, serious human capital concerns, and they've needed supplemental funding or loans from the district to support their academic programming due to their small size.
The next school is the Reach Partnership School, operated by Civic Works. They were rated developing in academic performance and climate and meets expectations, effective in financial management and governance. They were rated highly effective in Park Achievement Trend, in ELA 10 in the 88th percentile overall, and developing in Algebra 1 in the 50th percentile. They were highly effective in absolute park performance and ELA 10 in the 82nd percentile, and effective in Algebra 1 in the 73rd percentile. They were rated not effective in college and career readiness, which looks at a school student's participation, success, and indicators of college and career readiness, as well as enrollment in college. They were rated effective in the vision and engagement metric of the school effectiveness review, and they were rated developing in students with disabilities. The next school is Tunbridge Public Charter School, operated by AFIA Baltimore. The recommendation here is for a 5-year renewal. They were rated effective in academic performance, highly effective in climate, and meets expectations, effective in financial management and governance. They were highly effective in park growth, in math 6 through 8 in the 99th percentile overall, and in ELA 6 through 8 in the 91st percentile, effective in math 3 through 5, 73rd percentile, and developing in ELA 3 through 5 in the 53rd percentile. They were effective in programming for all student racial ethnic groups. And while there were differences in achievement between white and black students that need to be addressed, they have they have a myriad of educational practices to address that, but there continue to be large gaps between student groups, and that needs to be addressed in the future. They were rated highly effective in student, parent, and staff satisfaction, and highly effective in student attendance, chronic absence, and in suspensions.
So the school, I just want to kind of go back to that effective programming for students across racial groups. So they have good practices in place, like adjusting their curriculum based on the needs of students, and changes in their approach and assessments. They have teacher development strategies to provide on grade level content for students. They have kept their lower performing group in that effective range above the 65th percentile, but they have gaps in their performance. So they need to do some more development and focusing on how they raise their achievement of their students and really thinking about the needs of their students. So. And the last, this is a historic moment because you guys have, you've approved the adoption of IHBJ, the changes that we made to that allows for a school to be considered for an 8-year renewal. So this is the very first time we'll be doing this recommendation, so it's a pretty big deal. This school was rated highly effective in academic performance and climate, meets expectations in financial management, which is the highest rating for that, and effective in the governance category. They're highly effective in park growth. For their math students in the 100th percentile, which is the top of the, I don't know if you can get better than that. And for English language arts, the 96th percentile. They were rated effective in programming for all student racial ethnic groups. They have practices in place like ensuring that their instruction is tailored to student needs, that they use bilingual materials. They have a focus on hiring bilingual teachers. They have an understanding of the differences in the populations of students. They serve a largely Latino population that is complex in terms of the identities of those students, and that's shown in their application. They're mostly a Latino school, so they have a smaller population of African American students and white students. So they barely have enough students for us to consider this measure in just on 1 year. It is something they want to pay attention to as population trend shifts. So they're meeting the needs of students and continuing to deepen that practice that they're being really successful with their Latino students. They're highly effective in cohort retention. They're effective in student and staff satisfaction and highly effective in parent satisfaction. This school is eligible for this consideration because they've met the standard to be considered for a full renewal, and they have had 2 prior consecutive 5-year renewal contracts. And thus, that makes them eligible for consideration the very first 8-year renewal. And that is the end. There are appendices for people who want to get into the data around some of the schools, particularly the traditional schools that we started off at the beginning. And there are deeper materials. There is a annual portfolio book that goes through each application, each recommendation with data for each school that we talked about tonight. So please take a look at that. It's online. And there are for schools that have recommendations around closure or surplus. They have hard copies also available within the school for people to view at that school. But the digital copies are widely available for everyone. Thank you.
Great job. I guess, one, we know every charter school is different. When I looked at Govins and I looked at Wolf, they have the same overarching group that runs the school.
Yes.
So over time, will Govins migrate to be like Wolf, or is each entity so different that you can't make that assumption?
I would say they have a strong operator that's operating that each school. Right. But in terms of school performance is complex. It's why we look at a mix of qualitative and quantitative measures. There's a lot of factors that go into what the performance looks like at individual schools. Govins is recommended for a 5-year, which indicates, there's strong operations in place, there's strong leadership in place, they have strong outcomes for students. So I think, they have a lot to be proud of, too, in their own right. And BCP has been a strong operator, and you can see that as evidenced by the outcomes for their students and their practices.
Okay, so I guess a dovetail to that. So entities like BCP, do we look to replicate their skill set when we can?
Yes, I mean, we talk to them. We're always in conversations with them around, converting more schools. They manage mostly conversions. That's their specialty. I want to say Govins, and I need to look at them so I don't look at John because I don't want to be wrong about that. Because now I'm misremembering the order. Is it Govins or is it Frederick? Which one was the most recent? Govins. Govins was first. So Frederick was the one that most recently converted. Tier 3, yeah. So,
and I think part of the strategy that
the board has asked us to do is to actually be more refined in our need with regards to charter schools. And I would say, that one of the things that we've articulated to the board is the need for partnership around schools that have been traditionally underperforming or are in communities that have traditionally been underserved with high-quality educational options. Now, that being said, BCP is Baltimore Curriculum Project, is one of the operators who actually engages in that work. And you have to have operators who, frankly, are willing, not afraid, and successful in that kind of work. So, we have said, and I've said on other occasions, we reached out to Baltimore Curriculum Project when we were looking at Frederick because, quite frankly, we wanted, as Ms. Alvarez has said very powerfully throughout, we did not want new buildings to only be new buildings. We wanted them to be new schools and new opportunities, and we know that it takes time, but given the resources and the capacity that we have as a district, we're using partnership with proven operators to help lift. That being said, I think we need more operators who are successful in this kind of work.
And that's also, you guys approved as part of the priorities. Conversion is part of the priorities in the charter application, in the upcoming application. So we had that, conversation earlier. So it's important. And they're a good partner. They help in other ways. They partner with schools that are not operating and help in a lot of other ways. Like right now, they're partnered with Pimlico and helping us with climate there. So Pimlico. Yeah, so they're just partnering to help us with climate, doing some additional supports with that staff. So they've been a good partner in spreading good practice.
Madam Chair, Ms. Alvarez, can you talk to us about the difference between charter and transformation? Because the Reach School is the only transformation.
No, it's not. It's two. NACA 2 is also a transformation school.
Can you talk to us about the difference?
Yeah. So transformation schools are operator schools. They are funded differently. So that's a big kind of difference between the two school types. Charter schools get a higher proportion of resources accessible to them as cash or more flexible resources with the responsibility of managing those dollars appropriately. With transformation schools, they receive some supports that charter schools don't receive. So they're funded more similarly to a traditional school. So, for example, charter schools are responsible for securing their own facility and paying rent for a facility. Transformation schools are housed in district facilities. They don't pay rent. We take care of the costs of the facility costs. Charter schools are responsible for the cost of their principal. Transformation schools are not responsible for the salary of their principal like traditional schools. So we carry that as a locked position. So they select those people. So they have those kinds of autonomies as an operator and selecting and recommending the candidates they want for their school. So they have those kind of similarities. They have the ability to have different programming or having different focuses that are based on their proposal that the board approved. So they have that similarity. But they also sit in a network, so they get network support. They get access to district curriculum and district professional development in addition to what they bring to the table in terms of support. So those are some of the key differences between those two school types.
And the students are not in a lottery for those schools?
They are. So our transformation schools are 612. So the transformation initiative was originally started under Dr. Alonzo in 2010. At that time, we had an issue where we had middle school students dropping out before they got to high school. And so the idea was if we partnered with operators around a 612 model, and there was a team of adults who knew those students, that they would help them pull through to graduate. That was the original rationale behind transformation schools. So that's why the majority of them were 612. We also partnered with some entities that specialized in alternative options, because again, we were trying to deal with this dropout problem through the transformation initiative. But all secondary students, meaning students starting in 6th grade, so middle and high school students in the district participate in choice. And the choice process is a lottery. So students at transformation schools, similar to other district-run schools, they students list whatever school they want as part of the choice process, and that goes through a matching and a lottery process. So that's how students get into the school.
Thanks.
Commissioner Frank?
Just to echo Commissioner Reed, amazing job. So many months of work in just a half an hour presentation. Well done. I did want to say I'm enthusiastic about the plan for our high schools, and I encourage the public to understand exactly what that means, and I imagine there's a lot of opportunity to get feedback in the communities for what the transformation of high schools will mean to our district. I have one comment and one question. So the comment is, I do think with the potential for high schools, there may be more opportunity for untraditional ways to approach financing and construction. I know that the district has had examples of this that maybe didn't work well financially, but I encourage the district not to use that as the only example and not to rule out public-private partnerships, or maybe there's large, high schools have large acreages, and maybe there's opportunity to co-use sites for other purposes. Maybe there's opportunities to partner with the city. But I just think when you're working with such large parcels of land in neighborhoods, it can be more transformative just to have not just a new school, but other opportunities as well. And I would ask you to think about bringing on some expertise, at least at some point, to get some perspective on whether that's possible. I have no expertise on it. I don't know whether the district does, but I suspect it's out there, and it's probably in Maryland. It's probably not that far away. So I would ask you to at some point think about that as a way of leveraging our dollars to get better outcomes. The question I have is related to, it's a question I ask a lot, enrollment. Can you talk about how, with regard to always wanting to retain and increase our enrollment, it seems to me that investing in our high schools will do that. It will keep our students in the district attending better schools with better outcomes. And as the CEO said, it's not just about the school, it's a transformation of academics and everything as well. So can you talk about what you think an investment in high schools will do to the overall enrollment of the district, keeping students in the district and attracting students to the district?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with you that we're hopeful that would help us maintain more students. And so she's not in the room, so I don't want to misquote her, but my memory is that, Dr. Stewart has done like an analysis of what's happening like with our trends with students exiting the district. And so we know that we have some additional students that come in for our high school programs when they're high quality. And so we think by focusing on high schools, that will potentially also increase that. But I also want to emphasize, because that's important. It's important that we increase enrollment. It's important to how we're funded and meeting the needs of students. I'm also mindful of, it's important for the students who are attending our schools today. I always want to balance that when I say that, because I think for some members in the public, especially when we talk about the 21st century plan, for some people, there's been such disinvestment historically in these institutions and communities, and people see these as not being about their children. And so I want the communities listening, particularly our under-resourced communities, a lot of Black communities. That's not been the case. And this is about those children. This is about our Black children and their broader children, but it's about those communities too. While we, hope to be more inclusive and have everybody, we would love, and we need more people to attend our schools. But I also want the communities who often feel neglected to know we are thinking about you. We do care about your children too.
Right, I agree with what you said, but I was specifically talking about keeping our students.
No, I know.
and retaining
I just wanted to take the opportunity to say
Obviously,
that.
I'm glad you did. Thank you.
And
If I
Rachel
could
was just trying to.
follow up on that, I just want to remind us that even though we've seen our graduation rate continually increasing, it is at 72%. And so one of the things that we've already started to do, even without, these new buildings that we're hoping to transform, is we've started a ninth grade initiative, because we know that ninth grade is the year when students are most likely to get off track and to instead set themselves up for dropping out, right? In terms of attendance, in terms of behavior and kind of engagement in the climate of the school, and in terms of passing courses. And so what we've already started to do is to take a deep dive into our data of our ninth graders to see what we can do now to keep them so that they will be there, and we won't see drops in enrollment because students are dropping out.
Commissioner Bondima.
Thank you. I'm going to take this opportunity to skip back to a question that Rachel talked about in the beginning of the presentation. Is in reference to your CTE programs. I think that I've asked questions like this before, and if I did, please excuse me, maybe I need to get some more clarification. We have a program in a construction program, and I'm not too clear about how that's working, because it's really clear that there's a lot of contractors out there, a lot of contractors. I don't know if you have tapped into the Maryland State minority contractors. If you have tapped, because how many is it, Vernon, this commissioner? It's been 300 or 400 in the program, and they tap into our construction a whole lot. Whiting Turner and all these other non-minority companies, and they're building our buildings, and they're in there all the time. They pay very little money to our students, just enough to get by. However, what they do have, and I'm not sure if you realize it, they have quite a few entrepreneur programs. They bring in young people, and for the little bit of money that they pay, they will allow them to train in different areas in construction. And I can tell you for a fact that a lot of these young people, and sadly, I must say that a lot of them are not from Baltimore City Public Schools, but they tend to come in and learn everything possible, even the business part. And they go out and they open up their own companies, dump trucks or whatever. They open up their own companies. And I think that, and I'm not sure if you already are tapping into that, okay? But I know for a fact, for sure, that we need to bring all of these contractors together and maybe have a conference and bring them into our system and demand that they participate in hiring our students and training our students. Because some of these companies take advantage of our students with a little bit of money, just enough to get by. But I think that will be a wonderful opportunity. I think I talked about this before in the operations committee, but I think that we need to pay close attention to that. And it's real easy to get in touch with them, and they're very willing to participate.
That's great, and I'll connect with you for that connection. Our construction partners have actually been some of the strongest in terms of providing our students with opportunities for work-based learning, and Senator McCray actually just took a group of our students on an apprenticeship tour to look at a variety of different construction apprenticeship opportunities, and we'll be starting a youth apprenticeship program come this spring, so students can get 450 paid hours, and a number of those will be in construction as well, so this would be a great time to connect with that group.
I just want to add one thing. They will tell you that, I don't know, but I would love to talk to you about it because it's bigger than what you can believe. And I think that we need to, and a lot of companies do not feel like they want to pay the money, but if they're doing our work, we need to make sure that they get back to our system.
Absolutely. I'll connect with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
have one final thing. Don't want to prolong this, but I would expect there to be more effectiveness from the schools that are transformational because of the support that they're getting from network and the support that I guess we provide with principals.
So, I mean, so these are still operator-run schools. So the operators, evaluating, they're selecting their principals, they're managing their principals, they're managing the school operation. So they have the ability to partake in district services, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the responsibility to make sure they're training their staff, and that they're running the school effectively, and that they're using their resources, and that they're doing the work of attracting students. So there's a lot that goes into the business of running a school.
Sure.
And we're expecting the operators to manage that. And so while they have the ability to take part in things, there's still work that goes into running it. So they're not traditional schools, so they have access to take part in certain things, but they still have to do the work of honoring that contract and fulfilling the requirements under each of those key things. And they have autonomies underneath. They have a significant amount of autonomy. So it's important that they're fulfilling their obligations under the agreement.
Particularly with the high schools, how do we feel about choice impacting progress? Because I would expect that there potentially is some transience in being able to choose the high schools that you may want to go to. You may choose one for ninth grade, and then you may choose another for a different grade level or a couple of years. How do we feel that impacts performance overall at some of these schools?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that we looked at in considering what schools to propose for the feasibility studies is where they were located and what the population of students looked like in proximity to them, and then how long students were traveling to get to different schools, because that distance often, sometimes when you have students who are, and this is anecdotally, so I don't but sometimes when you have students that are traveling or changing from one school to the next school, distance is often a factor. Sometimes it's other things. Sometimes it's school climate,
Sure.
So there's a lot of factors. So that's why the plan is combined. It's never just about the building. We have to improve the overall quality and make sure that near where students live, there are good quality options for them. And so the closer they are to home, while still having choice, because sometimes what's best for a student is a niche program, like you think about like a Vivian T, which is medical arts.
Sure.
That's not going to be in every school, and it's a small environment. And so sometimes that's what families need, and that may require traveling a distance. But it shouldn't be that you're traveling that distance because there's not a school near you that is quality. We have to make all of our schools quality, and it's a collective effort. It's going to take everybody that works for city schools and our partners and our families. Our families are an important voice and important part of this.
I agree. Thanks. And I appreciate the statements that you made earlier, and this is not about what I just asked, but earlier about where we are in the history of the city. And the need to make sure that we're taking care of the schools that have historic impact, not just for their city, but for the country. So I appreciate you juxtaposing that with making sure that we have quality programming in our traditionally underserved communities, and to let the public know that the school system is really doing its best to monitor those needs so that we're actually making sure that all of our young people are achieving, but the communities are also being taken care of from our standpoint. I know that there are things that we cannot control as a school system, but we are, from what you're saying, doing our due diligence to pay attention to those needs in those traditionally underserved communities while making sure that there are quality programs in them. not just the buildings, because we need the buildings. We have the oldest portfolio in the state, right?
Yes.
But and probably in in a lot of places. But I just want to thank you for making mention of that publicly, and hopefully people are listening to that. Thank you.
Yep, and so we need everybody, my last thing, to help get the legislation passed to give us that $400 million, as well as Kerwin.
House
There are two big bills that impact city schools, and we need everybody writing letters, advocating, knocking on doors, calling up people to get that passed, because our students deserve both quality buildings and the funding to support quality academics. We've been operating as poor people in a certain instance because we've been underfunded, and that impacts the quality of our programming too. And so our students deserve the best, because they are.
Now, you had a great chart when you said we get 29 million, but it costs 44 to fix one school.
That's right.
I mean, that's pretty important.
Thank you. You can tell from all the comments that you've really charged us up here. Hopefully everyone has really been listening. Again, this report is available. Please asking everyone to take time to really read it, study. As we go through some dates to remember, there are going to be some times when for folks to come forward to get more details, but this is one of the most important things that we do. And again, as everyone has said, I just want to echo thank you for the enormous amount of work that I know has gone into bringing these, as you do every year, bringing these proposals to us. Thank you.
The only thing I will add, and it's because they're here tonight, and not because my recommendation is clear about Wolf Street, but I just want to say Principal Gaither is here this evening, and it is not with fairy dust that a school can serve large numbers of ELL learners, of recent immigrants, of young people who come from families who are challenged not just with being oftentimes in lower income, but are challenged increasingly with psychological assault on their humanity. And it is places like Wolf Street that model the kind of refuge that that I referenced earlier, right? In a city with many challenges, we should have schools that are refuges for our young people. And I want Principal Gaither to know that I know it wasn't a 2 or 3 year process. It takes time to get there, but the steady, consistent focus on the right thing. It's one of the best things that happened today was knowing that this recommendation, and to be the first, since we're looking at history, I can't think of a better school to get the first 8-year renewal in Baltimore City Public Schools. So congratulations. Yes, yes, Commissioner McFadden. I'm just saying my recommendation. I knew it might be premature, but since he may not be here for the others, but yes, if the board agrees.
Well, we'll say even the recommendation is historic, so whether we, okay, so we're still cool, we're still good, okay. Thank you again. The board committee reports are written and are available, correct? Will be available. So I encourage folks who really want to read those reports, if you don't come to the meetings, they will be posted. As I'm looking at committee chairs as I say that. Right? No, I gave everybody the look. I've been accused of giving the principal look too much. Just a reminder of upcoming meetings. The Operations Committee meeting will be here in the boardroom on Tuesday, November the 19th at 10:30. The Policy Committee meeting, Tuesday, November the 19th at 3:30 here in the boardroom. And as you heard, there'll be, if you wanted more of that discussion around the policy that we postponed, that would be a good time to attend. The board forum, legislative forum is, and this is an important one, Wednesday, November the 20th. That is when we will be discussing those issues that are going to be coming before the legislature for this season, and you heard a couple of them tonight. It'll be here from 5:30 to 6:30 in the boardroom. The Parent and Community Advisory Board meeting is Tuesday. Something isn't correct. Because, well, then Wednesday
It's not the 20th.
is not the 20th. So I have November the 21st. Is that a Tuesday or a Thursday?
Do you want me to check?
Yeah, one of those dates is not.
It's a Thursday. The 21st is a Thursday.
Okay. So Thursday, November the 21st, 6:30, here in the boardroom. Teaching and Learning Committee is December the 3rd, 3:30, here in the boardroom. December 3rd is also the important date for the Comar hearing, which will be held here at 5:30. And then the board work session for operators going through renewal will also be held here in the boardroom on Thursday. Boardroom. Are there any other items that we need to discuss? If not, is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Commissioner Fadden. Yes, the question about, we do not have a second meeting this month because of a holiday. We have time to stay home and give thanks. If you'd like to come, Commissioner Bondima is going to bring the turkey dinner. Okay. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Commissioner Richardson second. We all said aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, folks.